What's up, guys? Welcome to the Line Movement pre-Week 9 kickoff. We have a game tonight. Despite what you may hear about all of the 49ers being on the COVID list, being injured, we do have a game tonight. Nothing else going on in the country right now. So this is what we are here to talk about. No Joe Holka this week. He's feeling a little under the weather. He wanted my co-host, Matt LaMarca, and I to have all the shine. How are we doing, Matt?
I'm feeling good, man. I just launched my hit debut R&B Christmas track on Twitter yesterday. So that was a lot of fun. I have an exclusive deal coming to Tower Records in the near future. It's gonna be a blast. But I'm excited.
I'm not familiar with this. Will you give me some context here?
Yesterday, while I was on a DraftKings stream, it just sort of came up. We were talking about Christmas music, and back when I was in college, I had a harebrained scheme that me and my roommates were going to write a Christmas song, because if you can write one good Christmas song, it'll play for like 100 years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we worked on it for like 6 months and recorded it, and eventually decided that it was not fit for public consumption.
Really? Because I was just about to ask for a couple bars here.
Well, if you go to my Twitter account, you can find it, because I did one verse and one chorus yesterday.
Look at him teasing the Twitter account. Why buy the cow? If you can get the milk for free, I will be heading over to LaMarca's Twitter account after this show to check that out. We have a game, though, to discuss here. As I mentioned, we have the 49ers versus the Packers. Most of the inactive news had already come out earlier today. I would say the big news right now is how much Aaron Jones is going to be used. He is active. I just saw a quote come across from an article that said indications are Jones's calf has made significant progress, but is still not 100%. That could mean he will be used only sparingly or in an emergency situation. So, LaMarca, are you buying this or are you selling this as it pertains to Aaron Jones touches? Let's set the over-under at 10 touches tonight.
I'm going pretty comfortably under 10 touches. The one thing we know about the Packers training staff is that they are super conservative when it comes to rushing players back. I mean, we saw it earlier this season with Devontae Adams. He really wanted to get back out on the field, and the team basically told him no, even though they were dealing with a bunch of injuries at the wide receiver position at the time. So I think that this is really just a case of they don't have Jamal Williams. They don't have A.J. Dillon. They just want to have Jones available just in case. That's how I interpret the situation. But I still think that Dexter Williams and Tyler Ervin outtouch him tonight.
Yeah, in the, of these two backs, Tyler Ervin, ever since he came into the league, he has profiled as a pass catching guy. If you see, this isn't my take. I saw Sean Siegel mention this over at RotoViz, that almost all of his snaps this season have come out wide, split out as a wide receiver. So if that thesis is correct, you would think Dexter Williams is going to get the majority of the carries tonight.
Yeah, I agree. I think Williams is the more traditional, first and second down running back. Player profiler has his closest comp as Noshan Moreno, which you could do worse than that, right? I mean, Moreno had a couple of years of relevance there in Denver. So I think he's the early down running back. The question is does the early down running back have more fantasy value than the third down running back? Like Ervin, even if he doesn't see a ton of carries, if he gets, let's say, 5-6 targets, is that more valuable than getting, 12 rushing attempts? I think it probably is, unless you like Williams' chances to find the end zone.
Yeah, and as far as this goes on the showdown slate, I mean, they're both $200. So I think there's merit to playing both. If you had a difference in price there, I think you could probably break ties. I think I do probably lean toward Dexter Williams, because even they've worked these guys in, but I just don't see Ervin, getting peppered with targets out of the backfield. Maybe I'm being naive on that. I think they go more, 4 wide, 5 wide stuff, let Aaron Rodgers do his thing. But I mean, you're more of a film guy than me. Like, Rodgers isn't a check down guy. Like, no. He likes to move the ball.
No, it's true. And I mean, the Packers, while they're certainly not healthy at wide receiver, Devontae Adams is back.
Yeah.
He is back to being the target hog that we've come to expect. He's seen double-digit targets in 9 straight games that he's finished. He had 13 catches 2 weeks ago. He had 3 touchdowns last week. He is the guy that is going to catch the passes in Green Bay. So there was a little bit of a surprise, I guess, with Allen Lazard tonight. He kind of was expected to come off of the IR, but the Packers are going to give him another week. So that does leave them a little bit thinner at the wide receiver position. But I agree. I mean, Irvin probably doesn't factor in a ton into the passing game. So maybe that does make Williams the better play. I think either way, it's close, like you said. So I guess, ownership might be an important factor here, and then just ceiling. And if we think that Williams is going to be the goal line back, then maybe that does give him the better ceiling.
Yeah. Let's talk about the pass catchers. Obviously, we don't need to spend time on Devontae Adams. He's going to see 10 plus targets. He's going to have a massive role in the red zone, yada, yada, yada. He's going to be highly owned because on this slate, you can afford whoever you want. So, yeah, we're not going to tell you to fade Devontae Adams. I mean, he's going to get so much usage. It's not even funny. You mentioned Lazard not playing. I mean, Marquez Valdes-Scantling is going to be the next guy who projects the best as far as the wide receivers. And then you're really getting down to the bottom of the barrel, Equinemius St. Brown, Malik Taylor. My thought is outside of Adams, they probably run a lot of 2 tight end sets with Tonyan and Sternberger. It seems like Rodgers, even when Tanyan's been out, likes throwing to Sternberger. I think MVS, even though theoretically there's more opportunity, he's still like a big play or bust guy. I don't know if much changes for MVS tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking for another Packer to play because I think that the chalk way to construct the Packers is you take Adams, you take Rodgers, and you take one of the running backs. I'm looking for who that other guy might be. Maybe it's Sternberger. It just feels tough to click on his name when you can go cheaper and get, one of the running backs or Trent Taylor. So I don't hate the call. I think that it definitely is a nice variance play for tournaments. I probably would go with MVS if I was going to take another pass catcher. But his production has been pretty poor since Adams has come back into the fold.
Yeah. Let's talk about the other side of the ball here. The 49ers have 2 running backs as well that I believe are going to get a lot of touches tonight in JaMychal Hasty and Jerick McKinnon. The difference between them and the Packers is they are priced up. We got McKinnon at 8,000 and Hasty at 7,200. Obviously 2 different types of backs here with different skill sets. Do you prefer one or the other, all things being equal?
Yeah, I think this one you have to kind of play the game script, right? Hasty was the guy who was on the field last week while this game was competitive. He had 12 carries compared to just 3 for McKinnon. I think that he is the guy that they want to be there between the tackles running back. McKinnon is the pass catcher. He saw 4 targets last week. He turned that into 4 catches for 40 yards. He's probably the guy that plays in the passing down. So if you think that Green Bay jumps out to an early lead in this contest, then maybe you look at McKinnon. But if you think that it's going to be a little bit more competitive, I think Hasty is the preferred option.
Yep, I'm with you there. Before we talk about the pass catchers for the Niners, I didn't get your take on the spread and the over-under here. Last I'm seeing Green Bay is a 7-point road favorite here, 48.5 over-under. Just as I read that out loud, that seems like a lot of points for this game with how banged up they are. Are you leaning the under?
I'm leaning just towards the 49er side here. If you look at the betting activity in this contest, it kind of screams Packers. 62% of the spread bets, 87% of the spread dollars. But that doesn't really tell the full story. A lot of that activity came in early in the week when you could get the Packers laying less than a touchdown. Since this number has gotten up to 7 or 7.5 in some places, the sharp betting action, all the steam movements have all been on San Francisco. So I think if you can grab them still getting a touchdown, that's the move. even with all their injuries, even without Jimmy Garoppolo, I still think 7 points at home is too much, especially considering, and I don't put a ton of stock in this, but we have yet to see a favorite cover on Thursday Night Football this year.
Yeah. And, the one thing about the 49ers here is I think, to me, losing Kittle, losing Ayuk, some of their playmakers, obviously they don't have Debo either. Like that's where it hurts. I don't really think this is for both the running game and the quarterback. Going from Garoppolo to Mullins, going from Mostert to McKinnon and Hasty, I find that difference negligible. The question, and to me then, I think this line is probably overreacting to that a little too much. And we know how good Shanahan is scheming, getting the best use out of his players. Like JaMychal Hasty is going to have room to run tonight.
Yeah, and I mean like you said, the Mullins Garoppolo difference. I do think Garoppolo's better. I don't want to be one of these Nick Mullins guys who's who's saying that he deserves to be the starting quarterback, but I don't think that we're talking about a huge drop in production between the two, especially when you consider how bad this Packers defense has been. Especially against the pass. They have Jair Alexander, who is still one of the best cover corners in the league. Basically everywhere else, they're trash. So I do think that this is a matchup where Mullins and the pass catchers can find a little bit of success.
For sure. And basically the flip side of the running back situation for the Packers is like the wide receiver situation for the 49ers. I mentioned all the guys that were out. I mean, when you look at projections right now, their top projected wide receiver is Trent Taylor. You have Richie James in the mix. You have a man named River Cracraft. You got Kevin White. These guys called up from the practice squad with all the other guys out. And then, of course, we have the tight ends as well. Jordan Reed activated for the first time today after a while of him being injured. Good timing for them with Kittle out. They also have Ross Dwelly at tight end. Is anything in this pass-catching corpse making it move for you?
Trent Taylor, for sure. I mean, I expect him to be very highly owned, on par with some of the Green Bay chalk, but he's like the only guy who has been a rotation part for the Niners with the team at full strength. So I think he plays, well over 90% of the snaps tonight, leads the team in targets. After that, I'm looking at the tight ends. I wish we knew a little bit more definitively how healthy Jordan Reed was. If this was a healthy Jordan Reed, I'd feel very comfortable plugging him in at 5,800. Or if we knew that he was just going to be like a tight end too, I would feel comfortable playing Ross Dwelly. As it stands, I think I want exposure to both, but I don't feel like I have a huge lean on one or the other.
Yeah, and when we saw Jordan Reed earlier this season, when he had his 2 touchdown game, he wasn't actually racking up a ton of targets. They weren't using him between the 20s a ton. It was just he was the go-to read in the red zone. And so now I'm wondering here, like you said, coming off this injury, I don't think you're getting excited about a 7 or 8 target game for Jordan Reed. That seems very thin. You're hoping to bank a touchdown in the red zone. And I do think Dwelly will probably get more burn in the middle of the field. So like a lot of these situations, I feel like it's going to be kind of a gross split.
Yeah, agreed. I think, there's, like I said, there's nothing that's really pushing me one way or the other, but we know that the 49ers lean on their tight ends. None of these guys are George Kittle, but the last time we saw Nick Mullins start a game, George Kittle had like nearly 200 receiving yards. So I'm expecting Mullins to target the tight end position. It's just which tight end is going to be the biggest beneficiary. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, and when you look at projections, I'm looking at one here. Reed projected 8.32 points, Ross Dwelly 6.37. Basically, Ross Dwelly, you're predicting him for, 3 catches, 35 yards, and you're projecting Jordan Reed for 1 catch for a touchdown, which is basically kind of how I feel like they get to those numbers there. So I think if you're playing, multiple lineups, you can split the difference with those guys. Obviously, in Showdown, you can do whatever you want. Like you could play both of them and try to get unique there if you don't think the wide receivers are going to get a ton of burn and Mullins just locks into those guys.
Yeah, the only lineup build that I would like really suggest not doing tonight is locking in either Adams or Rodgers at captain and then running it back with the other one at flex, going with Trent Taylor, and then going with one of the Packers running backs, because all of the construction that's built that way is going to be like extreme chalk. I think it's very hard to have a unique build if you're going to do like a Devontae Captain with Rodgers, Mullins, Dexter Jackson, and Trent Taylor. Like, I think that group of five, it's going to be very tough to then have a contrarian team, or a unique team, I should say, because there's only so many possible combinations with those five guys.
Yeah, and I think that's also a good point. I mean, if you've been hand building tonight, you've quickly realized the salary cap doesn't matter. You don't need to freak out if you're leaving $6,000 in salary on the table. Like, that is completely fine. And to LaMarca's point, if you are inching up towards the top of the salary cap, the amount of combinations you have that are going to allow you to be unique are pretty thin. So definitely don't worry about leaving lots of salary on the table. Shout out to the guys in the chat. We got Mikey Boy G. We got new esports fan, Eric Caldwell. James DeGen, I think I messed that up. James says tonight's a fullback TD kind of night. Yeah, it does. It does feel like Kyle Juszczyk would get some burn throwing my man's sunglasses. I know LaMarca is excited,
bro.
Yeah, that's right. Also, if you guys have not subscribed to this show on iTunes, if we have it in the show notes, we're on iTunes. You can get all of our NFL shows in audio form. Subscribe to that. If you guys have not subscribed to this Line Movement YouTube channel, we are close to 6,000 subs. Let's get to 6,000 subs. Hit the like button. We will be back, of course, on Sunday morning with Joe Holka, Dieter, and I walking through the slate with all the updated news. And then we have the Tilt Space every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. I'm sick of Mike Leone winning on his own, LaMarca. When is he going to, share the wealth with us?
I don't know. As somebody with no dog in the Tilt Space fight, I think it's just pure entertainment. Whether you guys are winning or losing, I always find myself tuning in for at least a couple of minutes here and there just to see what's going on. I mean, last week I happened to tune in right as Albert Owugi Boomnum, whatever you want to call him, scored a touchdown. And it's just fun. It's just guys hanging out, watching football with alcohol involved and thousands and thousands of dollars on the line. What could be better than that?
There you go. Cut that up in a promo. LaMarca has us covered there. We are going to move on to this main slate. And I say, forget, building up to the good stuff. Let's just start right out of the gate with the good stuff. We have Seattle at Buffalo. They're 3-point road favorites, 55-point over-under, the highest on this slate. What are you seeing here in the betting markets? I assume you're excited about this one as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at Seattle having an edge in both tickets and dollars. 67% of the bets coming in on the Seahawks spread, 79% of the dollars. And that makes sense for me. We look at the Seahawks, they're an offensive juggernaut, team that struggles to play defense. But the Bills are just a watered down version of the Dolphins, right? The Bills are a watered down version of the Seahawks. Let me get that correct. So if we expect this game to be a shootout, which I think makes a lot of sense, why wouldn't I back the team with the better offense? Seattle also is getting back Jamal Adams. More than likely, they're going to have Carlos Dunlap available this week. So they at least have some reinforcements coming on the defensive side of the ball. The Bills are just bad and they have no real help in sight. So anytime I think it's going to be a shootout, I'm going to side with Seattle, and that's the case here. Yeah.
This is going to be an interesting game for DFS. I think we're going to see a similar thing here where both of the quarterbacks are going to be owned. Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, you can definitely fit them in. I think Tyler Lockett and Stephon Diggs are going to be very owned at their prices, $6,800 and $7,400 respectively. But outside of that, I don't think there are a ton of plays that people are super excited about. I think people are getting a little bit of sticker shock on DK Metcalf. They prefer to play Lockett, for $1,000 cheaper. And none of these ancillary pieces really jump out. John Brown's been really banged up. He was off the injury report last week and then looked awful in the game. He's off it again this week. Who knows? No one gets excited about playing Cole Beasley. No one gets excited about playing either of these tight ends. What do you think? Do you eat the chalk here, Matt, or do you go off the board and try to leverage the ownership?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was hoping that Lockett would be a little bit more under the radar, but the prices just don't necessitate that, right? DK Metcalf, we said last week, it was the perfect spot to try and buy low on him, with Lockett being the guy that had the huge week the week prior. The Seahawks wide receivers, one of them is going to eat every week, if not both of them. If Metcalf is going to be less owned than Lockett, and I do agree that that's how things are shaping up, I have no problem paying $7,800 for this guy. I mean, he's already dropped 40 plus DK points. He did it last week. He's been over 20 plenty of times. The guy is a stud, and nobody on the Bills can cover him. So this is a game that I will have exposure to, but I don't think it's going to be a game that I fully stack up.
Yeah, I don't even think for the Seattle running backs, recording this on a Thursday evening, it doesn't make a ton of sense to try to guess what's going to happen there as far as Carson coming back. Obviously, if DJ Dallas gets the backfield to himself again, he's going to be a pretty good play. He wasn't efficient at all, but when you're getting goal line work and you're getting pass down work, you're just going to be a great fantasy play. I have an off the board play here. I saw that Greg Olsen missed practice yesterday. I haven't seen the updated injury reports, but for the first time this year, even before he got hurt, Will Dissly played more snaps than Greg Olsen. And Will Dissly's 2,700. We know on DraftKings, tight end is just a gross position. So if you're trying to save money while getting a unique cheap piece, of this game, I kind of like just throwing Dissly into a Russ double or even a triple stack.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I mean, if you're stacking this game up, you're going to have to find some unique ways to do that. I think Dissly's fine. Anytime, I'm never going to argue against a $2,500 tight end or a $2,700 tight end, especially when that guy plays with Russell Wilson. So yeah, that's totally acceptable. I think maybe Zach Moss too could be an interesting way to sort of pivot on some of the chalk in this game. He has become the clear guy in their backfield, coming off the best game of his career. And it's not like he's all that expensive at 5,200.
No. Yeah. The only other kind of interesting situation in this game to me is what's going on with Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. Zach Moss was a little banged up. He's the rookie that they drafted, and he comes in and he's now in the good side of this 50-50 running back split. With Devin Singletary, he's also getting the goal line work now as well. He had 4 green zone touches within the 20-yard line there, 53% of the snaps to Singletary's 48%, and he even ran one more route than Devin Singletary did. So when I'm thinking about how do I leverage ownership in this game, Zach Moss at 5,200 is a pretty intriguing play to me as well.
100% agree.
All right, guys, we are going to move on. That's a fun game though for DFS. Definitely going to want some pieces of that. Let's move over to Atlanta versus Denver. Atlanta is hosting the Broncos, 4-point home favorites right now, 50-point over under here. I'm kind of excited about this game. Pat Thorman said that he could see this be a sneaky kind of pace up spot. What are the bettors doing with this one right now?
I mean, just looking at the total, the Vegas seems to agree with you. This total has jumped up from 47 to 50, which is a pretty huge move early in the week. And the big reason for that, 93% of the total dollars have landed on the over. So this does look like a potential sneaky shootout. I don't know if you can call it sneaky when Atlanta is involved. They're kind of like a pretty obvious shootout team, but people definitely still question Denver's ability to move the ball. So maybe this game does fly a little bit under the radar, but I agree from a fantasy perspective, this game might be one to give some heavy consideration to.
Yeah, I think the only guy that is going to be pretty chalky in this game is Julio Jones at 7,200. He's coming off of the big game there on Thursday Night Football last week versus the Panthers. Calvin Ridley is going to miss this. So everything sets up for Julio to get a ton of targets in a good spot. Other than that, though, I think you can do what you want. Hayden Hurst will probably catch a little bit of ownership. The Broncos side is interesting. I mean, Jerry Jeudy's role basically completely changed last week. They kicked him from out of the slot to out wide. He had 162 air yards, the most air yards of any player in week 8. He wasn't very efficient. I saw Drew Lock overthrow him on the sidelines for what would have been a touchdown. So Jerry Jeudy at 4,700 is interesting to me. I mean, Noah Fant has 16 targets in his past 2 games after coming back from injury. Melvin Gordon is really cheaply priced at 5,300. Here, Phillip Lindsay had the big touchdown run, but he caught 6 balls. I mean, he has the nice side of this running back by committee as well. So the more I talk it out, I kind of like something like a Drew Lock double stack, and you bring it back with Julio or Hayden Hurst on the other side.
Now, the one question that I have regarding that Jeudy usage was that out of just pure necessity with Tim Patrick going down? Because if Patrick is back and he got in limited practices to start the week, maybe Tim Patrick is like a sneaky play. He's somebody who caught a lot of steam, with his performances prior to the last 2 weeks, really. So if you want to go contrarian in this game, I think Tim Patrick might be pretty sneaky at 4,900.
Yeah, and that's a good point about Judy's usage. And Tim Patrick, before he got hurt, I mean, he was playing the Cortland Sutton role in this offense. So I like that. And, it's a little scary. I mean, he costs more than Jerry Jeudy too, which is also a little hard to stomach. I mean, you look at Tim Patrick, you're like, you got to be like a $4,100 receiver. He's up here at 4,900. So I have a little sticker shock there. But yeah, I think, do you have a read on these backup Falcons wide receivers? Because, you have Christian Blake, who's pretty cheap. I've heard this theory floating around that as opposed to just like the next man up getting more targets, that they have like these 1-for-1 backups where it's like Christian Blake is Ridley's backup and Julio's backup is Olamide. Like, are you in the weeds on that, or do you have a preferred second Falcons wide receiver?
I'm not in the weeds on that at all. I will say that he finished third on the team in offensive snaps last week, Blake that is, behind Julio and Russell Gage. So I still think I prefer Gage to Blake, but I mean, he is 4,500 compared to 3K. So Blake might have some appeal as a pure punt. I just question the upside. Like even playing a full game, he had 2 targets, 2 catches for 14 yards. So even if I'm playing a guy at 3K, I want to see a path to, 15, 20 fantasy points. And I just don't see a path for him in that respect.
Yep. James in the chat confirming that Tim Patrick does look like he's going to go. So make sure you're keeping tabs on that. And I think the play is you pick one of those wide receivers to pair with Noah Fant if you're running a Denver double stack. And I think that could work out nicely at those price tags. Let's move over to this Tennessee-Chicago game. The Titans hosting Chicago, 6-point home favorites. Not a juicy over-under here at 46.5. What are the betting markets doing with this one?
Yeah, it looks like the Titans have a pretty significant lean early in the week in terms of dollars. It's pretty much 50-50 in terms of betting tickets. The Bears are coming in at 51% in that regard, but the Titans have 80% of the spread dollars. So the bigger significant bets early in the week are coming in on the Titans. That makes sense to me. The Titans have underperformed the past 2 weeks, but we know Chicago is garbage, right? I don't care that they managed to get that game to overtime last week. Nick Foles, his adjusted yards per attempt is down to 5.3 on the season. He really is. If you thought Mitch Trubisky was bad and you think Nick Foles is an upgrade, you clearly have not been paying attention, because he is the worst quarterback that I've watched this season outside of like Ben DiNucci. So I think this is a great spot to buy low on the Titans.
Yeah, and as far as DFS with this game, the 2 running backs are going to catch a decent amount of ownership, Derrick Henry and David Montgomery. I mean, Montgomery is priced really cheaply at 5,700. And I've never been a David Montgomery guy, but his workload every week since Tariq Cohen went down is like 20 carries and 5 targets. I mean, this is an incredible workload for any running back. And sure, does he have no juice? Does he have no upside for explosive plays? Yes. But at running back, all that matters is volume. He's getting it. So I think the chalk there will be somewhat justifiable. I do think there's ways to get creative in this game if you don't want to eat the running back chalk. I mean, Ryan Tannehill here, he is going to be very under-owned, and he's a pretty simple double stack with AJ Brown and Jonnu Smith there. Corey Davis coming on, although a lot of his points were in garbage time last week. And there are some interesting bring back options. Obviously, Allen Robinson is always going to garner a ton of targets, although he's a little priced up. And then, man, Darnell Mooney, still 3,900, played a season high snaps, as did Anthony Miller last week, who's also 4,000. So I do think if you want to fade the running game here and kind of hope that this game goes over the total, there's some interesting pieces to take stabs on.
Yeah, it's hard for me to talk myself into anyone on the Bears, really. The Foles is just so bad. I get you make some good points on Mooney and Miller. They do make sense if you want to use a bring back on the Titans side, but Tennessee to me just has so much more appeal. I wish Corey Davis wasn't so expensive. Like I was fully prepared to be in on Corey Davis, but 5,900 for Corey Davis, like talk about sticker shock. That's sticker shock right there. But he has had 10 targets in back-to-back weeks. So I think that if AJ Brown is clearly still the number one, it might be like a 1A, 1B type situation in Tennessee at this point.
Yeah, the one thing I'll point out, I mean, when you look at just the raw stats, that definitely is what you're led to believe. I mean, they both played 5 games this season, and all their counting stats are very similar. Ben Gretsch, who we had on the Line Movement Sunday show a few weeks ago, he writes the Stealing Signals column. He had wrote up some context for the Corey Davis stats from this last week that I thought were interesting. 5 of his targets, 4 of his catches for 45 yards and the touchdown were all in the fourth quarter against soft coverage in the blowout loss there. So I do think it's maybe not quite as close as it would indicate. If he was down, I think a little cheaper, I think I would be on board with it. It's just at 5,900. That's pretty pricey, I think.
Yeah. Agree. You're definitely buying high if you play Corey Davis at that price.
Yeah, but I do like the angle of maybe attacking the passing game here as well. But like you said, you're probably picking your spots in this game and not going over the top with a stack. Let's move over to this Minnesota Detroit game. This is another tough one to read where these teams like to play slow in their ideal world, but yet they can find themselves in these shootouts here. Minnesota, obviously, Dalvin Cook is going to be incredibly popular coming off. Minnesota is a 4-point home favorite here, 52.5 over under, one of the better ones on the slate. What are the betting sharps doing with this one?
Yeah, so I mean, the betting numbers here are like kind of pretend at this point because we still don't know what's going on with Detroit at quarterback. You know, Matthew Stafford was placed on the COVID IR list, but we're still not sure if he tested positive or he just came in contact with somebody who tested positive. From what I can understand, there's still a chance that he actually is able to play on Sunday.
Yeah, I was reading that too. If he continues to test negative each day between now and then, he can play. So, you know, I would say tomorrow is probably the big make or break day, right? Like if he has multiple days of, testing negative, he's probably going to be okay. So we should have clarity on that situation. Chase Daniel would get the start if Matthew Stafford can't go. From a DFS perspective, this is a game that I don't think outside of Dalvin Cook, people are going to be too interested in. No one's getting too excited about these pass catchers without Kenny Golladay there. Marvin Jones coming off of his one big game of the season. He's always good for one of those 2 TD games. And then they mixed in a lot of pieces. I mean, Marvin Hall was getting work. Danny Amendola is always in the mix. Are there any pieces here that stand out to you for DFS?
I think that this is a nice spot to maybe buy a little bit low on Justin Jefferson. The Packers apparently had so much respect for him that they were using Jair Alexander against Justin Jefferson as opposed to Adam Thielen in that game. I don't know. That was the rumor. I haven't checked the snap report, so I could be off. But if that's the case, it's not a huge surprise to me that Jefferson struggled a bit because Alexander's the best cornerback in the league, according to Pro Football Focus. So against Detroit, he won't have matchup concerns regardless of who's on the field. Their cornerbacks have been poor or hurt basically all season. And I continue to think that guy is just a really, really good football player.
Yeah, no, I agree with you too. He looks great when he's out there. And I also think he's good ownership leverage if the chalk is condensing on Dalvin Cook, where we see this where the public makes an assumption based on their game flow. They say, oh, they'll handle the Vikings. Dalvin Cook will rush the ball 30 times. What if that doesn't happen? What if the Lions score a quick touchdown and they force, the Vikings to throw? We've seen this movie play out. We saw it play out with the Falcons a few weeks ago, where we saw both Justin Jefferson, Irv Smith, Adam Thielen all have decent games because they will throw if they have to. So I like that idea. The thing is, it's a little bit pricey as a double stack as far as like Kirk, Thielen, and Jefferson, but I do think you could play him as a one-off. He's going to be low owned. I think there's lots of ways you could attack it. Any thought here on DeAndre Swift? I mean, his price stays in this $5,000 range most weeks. He only had 4 targets last week, but his second straight season high snap share, he was over 50%. So they keep inching his work up just a little bit each week.
Yeah, and the game script really was what worked against him last week, right? They fell behind big to the Colts early. I think that Swift is a very strong option this week at 5K. I mean, there are more obvious running back plays, but that's why Swift won't be nearly as highly owned. So if you are looking to get off some of the chalk at the position, I think Swift makes a lot of sense. And I honestly kind of like Detroit in general if Stafford is good to go. I don't know if I have a ton of interest with Chase Daniel at the helm. He has the reputation of being a solid backup quarterback, but his numbers are pretty uninspiring. But like, this Minnesota defense is nothing to be afraid of. So no. I will definitely have some interest in Detroit if Stafford is a go.
Yeah. And I'll mention TJ Hawkinson. I think my decision point on him is going to be where the ownership settles. He's pricey at 5,100. I normally don't like paying up in that range at tight end. That said, he's coming off a 10 target game with Kenny Golladay going out. So I think with the tight end position in general is such a wasteland that Hawkinson is worth a look for sure with Golladay out. Let's move on to this Baltimore-Indianapolis game. This is at Indy. Baltimore's 1.5 point road favorites, 47.5 over under. Who we betting here?
Yeah, this is a prime sharp spot this week. They love the Colts, and it makes perfect sense to me. Baltimore has not been the same team this season on the offensive end. They've fallen all the way from first in offensive DVOA to 18th or 19th. And now they lost Ronnie Stanley, who's one of the best offensive tackles in the game. So they've already kind of struggled to protect Lamar Jackson, which it's a lot harder to do that than you would think, right? He's so good at avoiding sacks, but he has taken a bunch of sacks this year. Now they're playing against a very good Indy defense. You can question whether or not Indy can score the ball, but they have sort of come alive the past 2 weeks. They had a comeback win against the Bengals. They put up 41 against the Lions. I think that this Colts team, as things stand at the moment, might be better than this Ravens team.
Wow. Yeah, I can see it from an all-around perspective. I'm always approaching things from the DFS side here, and I'm like, this is a running back by committee. We can't play any of them. Like, Phillip Rivers isn't supporting any of these wide receivers. They're even in a tight end by committee, like here with Mo Alley Cox, Trey Burton, and Jack Doyle. So I don't love them from a DFS perspective, but they do seem to hang around there and play teams tough. The teams I'm interested in are players for this DFS game is we got Mark Andrews now. His salary has plummeted all the way to 4,800 after being more up in that Kelsey Kittle range at the start of the season. He does have a scary floor, but that's baked into his price. We know he has a 2 touchdown ceiling here in this game. And then I also like J.K. Dobbins, similar to Swift, a rookie whose role continued to increase, especially after the bye. I mean, he had 15 carries for 113 yards, played 66% of the snaps, which was a 23% jump on his previous game before the bye. And he was running routes on 59% of dropback. So they really grew his role there. And man, I like it. We're not going to get Mark Ingram again. Gus Edwards is going to get 10 to 12 carries, but Dobbins is getting all the important ones. And I don't think people are going to go back to him.
Yeah. My only real concern is like I said, the blocking for the Ravens, but Stanley has been a much better pass protector than he has been a run blocker this year. So maybe their rushing game isn't as severely impacted by that absence. And I totally agree that Dobbins is the guy out of the two that you want. He's the better player, right? And he's only $100 more. If Edwards doesn't score last week and Dobbins does, we're talking about Dobbins being like one of the chalk plays of the week. But the other situation happened, and now we can get Dobbins at relatively low ownership. So if I was going to play someone on the Ravens, and again, I'm skeptical to play anyone, it would be Dobbins.
Yep. The chat mentioning we do have Hollywood Brown now as the on-record squeaky wheel. He had a tweet that he since deleted saying, if you got the soldiers, why aren't you using them? So Marquise Brown wants the ball. I mean, it is, on paper, you look and you're like, oh, Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews. That's a nice double stack. But I can tell you from doing that in tournaments, it's not a nice double stack this year. So I would prefer to pick your poison with one of those guys or play J.K. Dobbins is kind of how I think I'm going to attack this.
Yeah, I mean, the Colts, maybe they're not the best defense in the league, but they're one of the best defenses in the league. 4th in pass defense DVOA, 5th in rush defense DVOA. And again, some of the offensive line injuries might fly under the radar, but Ronnie Stanley should not be one of them. The Ravens just paid him $1 million. Like $1 bajillion million. I said $1 million like it was Austin Powers in 1960. $1 million. They paid him a ton of money, and now he's gone. Marshall Yanda retired in the offseason. Like, this is not the same team, folks. We got to accept that.
Yeah. All right. We are going to pick up our pace here. We are heading to Kansas City. They are 10.5-point home favorites. Carolina traveling to Kansas City here, 52.5 over under. We saw the Chiefs score 5 touchdowns last week, perfectly meeting their implied team total versus the Jets. Do the Chiefs keep it rolling here?
Yeah, my thing with the Chiefs right now is you need a very good reason to bet against them. They are the new Patriots, right? Like, the best thing about the Patriots was they just were a license to print money when they had Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. They were not only were they just like the best team in football, they were the best at covering the spread. They did it every single year on a consistent basis. Now we've got this Mahomes and Andy Reid combination, and those guys have gone 29, 13, and 2 against the spread, including the playoffs. That is a return on investment of over 35% if you just blind bet the Chiefs every single week. So if you are going to go against the Chiefs, you need a really good reason to do so. And I just don't see a good reason to do so with the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, I'm with you. And like you said, too, they've been so efficient in the passing game that they've kind of abandoned, even though they bring in Le'Veon Bell, they're like, look, we can throw the ball so efficiently. Why are we going to waste carries on these guys? And they had, 5 touchdowns that all felt like they were outside of the red zone last week, and they have that big playability. So I'm with you there. This is an interesting DFS spot because obviously we always want pieces of the Chiefs. Tyreek Hill and Kelsey will catch some ownership again. I think DJ Moore will be the more popular of the two receivers just because he's cheaper, and him and Robbie have had similar opportunity on the season. I mean, Curtis Samuel's coming off of that big game on Thursday Night Football, although his usage is a little fluky. I guess the thing we have to talk about here is we're getting Christian McCaffrey back. Yep. How are we feeling about him? I mean, we saw Dalvin Cook come back last week. People are afraid the guy coming off of injury, how could he get a full workload? And he smashes for 4 touchdowns and 50 DraftKings points. Is this one of those situations where we don't get worried about McCaffrey coming back? Or do you think it's going to be more of an even split with Mike Davis?
I think there's more reason for concern with McCaffrey than there was with Cook. Like, looking back in retrospect, everything the coaching staff said was that Cook was going to play full normal workload, right? We haven't gotten those same confirmations from the Carolina coaching staff. But when you think about it this way, we're getting Christian McCaffrey at 8,500, which is absurdly low for him. We're going to get him at less than 15% ownership, which is absurdly low for him. Like, he just has to be someone that you're considering in guaranteed prize pools.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that one here. And you can continue to kind of play roulette with these cheap Chiefs wide receivers. Demarcus Robinson, 3,200. It sounds like Sammy Watkins might be back, though, this week.
Yeah, I haven't been monitoring that situation, but if Watkins is out, that's where I'm attacking this game mostly. Like Mecole Hardman, Demarcus Robinson, those guys are just too cheap with Watkins out. We know that anybody playing with Mahomes is capable of posting a big fantasy day, particularly Hardman, right?
Yeah.
I know that everybody in the DFS community loves Mecole Hardman. So let's play him if we have another opportunity, right?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's move over to this Houston-Jacksonville game. Houston 7-point road favorites, 50.5 over under here. We got Jake Luton starting at quarterback for the Jags. This game is going to catch some ownership just because people like playing pieces against the Jags here. And the Jags, as far as bringbacks, are pretty cheap here. Other than James Robinson, he's priced up at 7,000. What are people doing with this game in the betting markets, though?
They're buying the Jaguars, which I don't understand. We were talking before about one of the biggest mistakes that GMs make is buying these guys who dominate as like 23-year-old college players. That's Jake Luton in a nutshell. He had one good year in college, and it was when he was a redshirt senior at Oregon State in the Pac-12 where they play no defense. So I think that Luton is going to be a clear downgrade from Gardner Minshew. And when you look at the rest of this Jaguars team, that's a problem because he's getting no help from anywhere else. I think you can make a case that Luton now makes the Jaguars the worst team in football. And I have been firmly in the camp that the Jets are the worst team in football. But now that you make that quarterback switch, it becomes very close for me.
Yeah. This game's interesting for DFS as well. I think James Robinson is a bad play if he is chalky at 7,000. Early ownership I'm seeing is he's going to be fairly popular. To me, it's just the classic thing of LaMarca mentions the quarterback uncertainty. This offense might look differently, although you got to assume they're going to continue to lean on the run there. But James Robinson hasn't been catching a ton of passes. I just worry at that price and that ownership, it might be very hard for him to fully pay that off. That said, I don't mind sprinkling in one of those wide receivers. DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault are both cheap on a bringback. If you want to do something like Watson and Fuller and Cooks and bring it back with one of those Jags wide receivers, I think that's perfectly viable. Do you have any other favorite plays in this game?
I mean, the Houston stack that you just mentioned is my favorite stack of the week. It's going to be chalky, so you're going to need to get a little bit more contrarian with some of the other parts of your lineup. But Deshaun Watson for $1,000 less than Patrick Mahomes, and then his two receivers for mid 5K, low or high 6K. Like, sure, I'll play any offense against the Jags, particularly a talented, concentrated offense.
Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting about this one is, part of the appeal of the Texans have been they get buried early in all these games, and then they have to just play hair on fire from behind the whole game. I do wonder here, David Johnson's also going to be popular at 5,600, and I could see them having a decent amount of success on the ground. Just talking it out, I wonder if David Johnson is cheap enough where you could do a Watson, David Johnson, and then one of the wide receiver stack and just try to capture all of the touchdowns on the Texans. And because David Johnson will catch some balls, I don't know if that's a bad correlation.
Yeah, I just checked. His correlation is roughly 33% with Watson, which is his highest correlated teammate. So
there you go.
David Johnson definitely viable in a QB wide receiver running back stack.
Yeah. If you're having a hard time deciding between, Cooks and Fuller at their prices and ownership, I think you could definitely mix in David Johnson. I actually did that in my main lineup last week because I had Russell Wilson and I was going to play DK Metcalf. Of course, in a perfect world, I'd afford the double stack. I couldn't do it. DJ Dallas, super cheap. So I just did a Russell, DJ Metcalf, tried to capture all the touchdowns. Obviously, that worked out nicely. I think this feels like a similar type of situation.
Agreed.
All right, let's move on here. The Giants and the Washington football team, the second lowest over under on the slate. We'll get to Dallas and Pittsburgh as well. Washington is a 2.5 point road favorite. Kyle Allen, you're telling me is a divisional road favorite.
Home favorite.
Oh, my bad. I was going to say that doesn't check out. Okay. I was reading my sheet wrong. What are we betting here?
Yeah, so the early sharp activity has been on the Giants. the betting tickets are split 50-50, but the Giants are getting 80% of the dollars. That has driven this line from 3.5 to 2.5. So this is early, and I have no inside information. I want to put that out there. I think that what the Sharps were doing was just setting up a situation where they can now hammer Washington. Personally, I think that getting Washington laying less than a field goal at home is a great bet. Their defensive line is the only good unit in the NFC East, right? Like it's the only unit in the entire division that is above average. You're getting them against an offensive line that's just middle of the pack and a quarterback who makes horrendous mistakes while under pressure. So I like the idea of getting Washington now that this line has come down a little bit, and it wouldn't surprise me if the Sharps start to attack Washington at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think this game is going to catch a lot of ownership here for DFS. Terry McLaurin should get some at 6,500. I mean, with his volume, he is always a very solid play. I do think Antonio Gibson, who the chat is excited about, is another solid play at 5,800, if not just the teeniest bit pricey there. I also think Evan Ingram at 4,300 coming off of a 10-target game is pretty interesting there. But, man, this is a game to pick your spots. I mean, with this kind of total, you're not wanting to load up on this game.
Yeah, no interest, particularly in the Giants side.
All right, guys, we are going to move to the 4 p.m. games here. We have 3 of them this week. Let's hit the like button, subscribe here as we enter the home stretch on this week 9 slate here. Always appreciate you guys tuning in. I know this game is about to get underway, so we will get you guys in the right mindset for this slate here down the home stretch. Thank you for tuning in to the Line Movement Thursday night show. We have the Chargers hosting the Las Vegas Raiders. They are 1-point home favorites, 51.5 over under. What are we seeing here?
Yeah, this game is one where I am sort of on a different page than the Sharps. They seem to like the Raiders. The Raiders are getting 87% of the spread dollars so far, which has dropped this line from Chargers -3 all the way to a pick 'em. That said, the biggest lean that the Sharps have on this game right now is on the under. This line, the advanced line, was 56 points. It's all the way down to 51.5. And it's because there have just been a host of steam moves on the under on this number. So this looks like a game that I thought would be a game that would be prime for DFS, but the betting numbers suggest that it might be a little bit lower scoring than anticipated.
It's interesting you say that too, because Thorman wrote this up as a pace down spot as well, of not seeing as many points here. So it's always nice when the betting market is reflecting some of the things he's seeing in the snap and speed trends here. And I agree with you. I mean, I'm looking at early ownership numbers, and a lot of pieces here are catching a ton of ownership. Josh Jacobs at 6,300. Keenan Allen continues to be underpriced at 7,000. Darren Waller is in that sweet spot at 5,800. And even Justin Jackson is probably going to catch a decent amount of ownership with Troymaine Pope, who came in and looked good. He got banged up. I believe he's in the concussion protocol or something along those lines. And they seem like they're kind of out on the rookie Joshua Kelly, who got benched basically during the game last week. So if you're telling me the betting markets are saying this game is maybe being overvalued from a scoring perspective, I'm looking at the ownership, says it's being overvalued. This is getting close to a stay away game for me.
Yeah, I do think, like you mentioned, Keenan Allen is just too cheap at 7K.
Yeah,
I don't know what this guy has to do to get priced properly, because he's gotten at least 10 targets in every game with Herbert under center, and he's not as big of a scoring threat as Davante Adams, but this is like a Davante Adams level workload that he commands. So yeah. I have no problem paying 7K for him.
Yeah, I think, coming off an 11 target game, like you said, he probably should be a 76, 7,700 wide receiver, still priced down here at 7,000. I do think if I were to attack this game from DFS, I'm probably picking my spot. I'm probably playing Keenan Allen, and then I'm looking for a leverage play on the Raiders side, which is probably for me, Henry Ruggs at 4,900, low ownership, leverage on the Josh Jacobs and Darren Waller chalk, and we know he has the ability to speed up the game, take a pass to the house. So that's probably what I'm looking at as of now, but we'll have to see how ownership pans out here as the week progresses. Let's move on to this Pittsburgh-Dallas game. Probably not going to have a ton to talk about here. Dallas trotting out someone named, Cooper Rush or Garrett Gilbert or whatever. They're 14-point home dogs. And I'm looking at that number and wondering, is that number even big enough at home going against the league's best pass rush?
Yeah, it's a really tough spot, right? The one thing I will say is that Ben Roethlisberger in his career has historically really struggled as a large road favorite. 6-13 against the spread when favored by more than a touchdown on the road. Now, I will caveat that with this is not the same Pittsburgh Steelers team, right? You mentioned that pass rush. It is ferocious. It's going against a Dallas offensive line that can't block, and it's going against a guy who was a 4th or 5th string quarterback to start the year. So that smells like a disaster. Right now, the betting splits, 62% of the tickets are on the Steelers. 58% of the money. So just a slight edge on the money for Dallas. I think it's too many points for me personally to feel comfortable betting. But if you wanted to take Pittsburgh, I certainly wouldn't fight you too hard.
Yeah. And I would say the usage of this game in DFS is kind of reflecting this spread. No one wants to use anyone on the Cowboys. People want to use the Steelers defense, and they want to use James Conner. You're at 6,900, very affordable here as well. He is going to catch some ownership. I think the thing that scares me at Conner when he gets higher owned here is we see Benny Snell stealing goal line carries. We know that if the game script plays out like Vegas thinks it does, it's going to be more of a blowout. Maybe he doesn't get used as much in the second half. Maybe they score with a couple quick passing touchdowns and don't need James Conner. They're always kind of looking to preserve him just because he's been pretty fragile and they want him for the home stretch here. So do you think James Conner is a trap in DFS this week, or do you not mind playing him?
I wouldn't say a trap because I do think it's a good spot for him. And I think he has a chance to return value. But what I doubt or question is if he has that GPP winning upside. I don't think he has the 40 DK point game in him. Yeah. I don't even know if he has the 30 DK point game in him.
Yeah.
So if he's going to be the chalk or somewhat chalky, there will be running backs with higher ownership than him. I don't know if that makes a ton of sense to target him because I don't see a lot of situations where he buries you.
Yeah. I think the play that I'm most interested in as of right now, and I know, but Deontay Johnson at 5,000, he's now gotten, slapped with the dreaded injury prone label. No one wants to roster a guy that's going to leave after one quarter. But when he has played a full game, he's had over a 30% target share in all of those games. And again, with DFS, sure, don't play him in your cash game lineup, but I'm trying to win tournaments here. He's going to be low owned at this price tag. And we know when he's healthy, he has been kind of running as that alpha wide receiver in this offense. So I like Deontay Johnson there.
I wish we could just morph him and Chase Claypool into one DFS player.
Okay, so and then he would be DK Metcalf?
Yeah, exactly. And I'd pay $8K for him.
There you go. All right, let's move on to this Arizona-Miami game. Arizona hosting Miami here, 4.5-point home favorites, 48.5 over under. The Dolphins a little banged up here. There are, I don't know if you felt that little crisp in the air, the Patrick Laird sizzing. It's among us here. LaMarca, what are people doing betting this game?
Yeah, there's a slight lean on the Dolphins from a sharp perspective. Dolphins getting 51% of the betting tickets, 65% of the betting dollars. So not a huge discrepancy. And of course, the usual caveat that it's early in the week. But I am just so all in on the Miami Dolphins bandwagon right now. If I had a little choo-choo train hat, I'd put it on and toot the horn for you guys. I think this defense, they're starting to get some respect. It's not enough. This is maybe the best defense in the league. They're not Pittsburgh probably, but they're right behind them. Their pass defense since they've gotten Byron Jones back is really good. They're allowing the fewest points per game. I don't care about the Myles Gaskin injury. Like, Myles Gaskin before the start of the season was a complete non-thought. So he's not going to move any lines for me. They'll be fine with Patrick Laird if they have to go in that direction, or Jordan Howard or Matt Breida, whatever they decide to do. The Tua numbers were a little bit scary, right? You know, he didn't play great in his first start. Just the second quarterback in league history to attempt at least 20 passes and rack up less than 100 yards in his first career start. But the other guy that did that was Ben Roethlisberger, and he turned out to be okay. So I'm all aboard the Miami Express.
Yeah, I'm torn about this game from a DFS perspective because I have some things I like a lot. You know, I love how Arizona speeds up these games. I love how they're pretty condensed right now with DeAndre Hopkins, Chase Edmonds stepping into a big role, and Christian Kirk kind of solidifying himself as that second wide receiver. That said, you know, there's some things here that worry me. You mentioned Miami's defense has been very good here. With Tua last week, they played a very conservative game plan. So I kind of worry, are they going to allow this game to open up and play fast? I also saw an interesting thing from Josh Hermsmeyer over at 538. The man who brought us Defense Doesn't Matter is actually starting to look at these kind of heat map trends of where quarterbacks generally have the most success throwing and where defenses are performing the best on the flip side, to see if you can fit those puzzle pieces together. And the Kyler Murray versus Dolphins matchup was one of the worst matchup fits for a quarterback based on where Kyler likes to throw and how good the Dolphins defense has been.
Beautiful.
So I'm getting a little worried about that. The other only benefit from a DFS perspective is, man, the Dolphins pass catchers are really cheap. Preston Williams at 4,100, he played more than Devontae Parker coming out of the bye. I don't know if we can fully read into it, if we've seen a true flippening there, but that's something to note at 4,100. And if you want to go back to Devontae Parker, he's only 5,200. So I'm leaning toward not stacking this game, which I'm surprised because I thought I might have earlier in the week. I think I still might pick my spots here. Maybe I play a Chase Edmonds and Preston Williams kind of thing. But the more we talk it out, I don't know if I want to stack this game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly in that camp where I don't think that the Dolphins they're like the anti-gasoline team, right? They're not going to play fast and they're going to limit points. So just doesn't seem like the type of team you want to target in DFS. The one additional benefit for their wide receivers was that Isaiah Ford is now gone. He hasn't been a huge factor in the passing game, but he did play on 35% of their snaps last week. So that is a few additional snaps to go around for the rest of the team. How those funnel out, whether they go back to Devontae Parker, whether you think maybe Jakeem Grant gets a little bit more involved on the offensive side, there are some additional snaps available at the position.
Yeah, and I will, all jokes aside, give my analysis on this backfield here. So I don't think Matt Breida is going to play. He's dealing with a hamstring injury. He was who everyone was going to get excited to play with Gaskin out. Jordan Howard will be active this game, but he has been inactive the past few weeks. I've seen quotes from him. He's been disgruntled. So I'm trying to figure out here, the team is clearly down on Jordan Howard. They have no choice but to give him some touches this week. The question is, how many touches? The other backs on the thing. I mean, they had already, Flores has already said it's this other guy. I'm not stalling on Patrick Laird. There was one other guy in the mix here that they said might get a couple touches, but Laird could legitimately be the pass catching back like we saw last year. He probably will get 5 to 6 targets out of the backfield because we know Jordan Howard isn't going to be receiving any passes. And if they're down to the Cardinals, Laird's going to catch some passes. So I'm not going to go full 2019 and tell you to jam Patrick Laird, but he is going to be out there. He was on the injury report with the ankle. When you're friends with Patrick Laird, though, you can just text him. He says the ankle is fine. It was just a little sprain, and he's going to be good to go this week. How about that for some journalism, LaMarca?
Hard hitting.
The
other guy that you're thinking of is probably DeAndre Washington.
No, he's not going to play this week. It was something Ahmed.
Okay, sure.
It was, yeah. I don't even think he was showing up in the projections, but Flores had a quote where he's like, Jordan Howard, Patrick Laird, and something Ahmed were going to be the healthy running backs this week. So yeah, DeAndre Washington is going to be a week away.
He's got a quarantine. Good point. I just don't think you need to give yourself the headache of trying to decipher this backfield. I know you love it.
I live for this headache.
I just can cross these names off pretty comfortably.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that you don't necessarily have to do. It is the late game. So if you want to leave yourself some salary flexibility, like if you have a flex, I mean, you can decide, like if for some reason Jordan Howard is inactive, I mean, leave 4,100 there. You can choose between Preston Williams and one of these running backs if you like. Say Matt Breida is a surprise active. Like you can give yourself some flexibility with the late swap here. Because we're running out of time, let's just get your favorite bets, either the side or the over-under in these two primetime games. We have Tampa hosting New Orleans, and we have New England on the road at the Jets. You got anything you like here before we wrap up?
Yeah. Don't just make life easy on yourself and just bet on the Patriots, because the Jets are a disaster. And New England, while they're bad, they're not Jets level bad. So I will happily lay, a full touchdown against them, or 7.5, I guess it is now in certain places. The Jets stink. I don't care that New England has looked bad. Everybody rolls the Jets. Their offense can't score. Their defense can't stop anybody. Patriots roll.
There you go. All right, guys. I love it. Thank you guys for coming out here for the Line Movement Thursday NFL pre-kickoff, pre-week 9 slate. We missed our buddy Joe Holka tonight. T's and P's to Holka. He'll get better here. He'll be back with us on Sunday. As will I and Dieter walking the slate. We'll be back with the Tilt Space, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. When this ends, I need to head over to LaMarca's Twitter to watch this Christmas jingle.
I'm telling you, next R&B superstar.
All right, guys, make sure on your way out, hit us with that like, subscribe to the channel. We will see you guys next time. I'm Peter Overzet, and this has been the Line Movement Kickoff Show.